let's get far out. And yeah, I'm excited because, like I said, there's really no focus today. I just want us to have a nice time being non-judgmental together. We always like to do a grounding exercise at the beginning of these group calls, and it's been a while. We haven't had a free group call in a while. So let's just do that. You can be sitting, you can be lying down, you can be standing. If you're walking or driving, that's fine. What I would encourage you to do for the next couple of minutes is just, again, allow yourself to be here. Allow yourself to be here. Eyes can be closed, eyes can be opened. What's important is I'm not judging myself in the normal way that we have a tendency to judge ourselves throughout the day. So the thoughts might be there. Perhaps they're nice thoughts, perhaps they're negative thoughts. Perhaps they're seemingly random thoughts. The thoughts are just there. All good. Likewise, in the body, perhaps there's all these sensations, right? Perhaps in our legs, our stomach, our chest, our head. All these sensations might be there, or you might not be aware of many sensations being there. All good. All good. Being non-judgmental in this way is not about achieving anything. Okay? This is like not only, oh, the thoughts going through my mind are not bad, or the feeling in my stomach, the uncomfortable sensation in my stomach or my chest. Not only is that not bad, but it's also not good. Okay? That's where we're at. So like non-judgmental in the sense of, who am I? Whatever. I'm not anybody. I'm just here right now, and I don't even know what this I is. Very much just dropping what comes up by dropping the significance of it meaning something. So the thoughts are still going to be there. The feelings are still going to be there. My voice is still going to be there. Not bad, not good either. And you might find yourself kind of like dipping now into like almost like some kind of hypnotic trance state because of this kind of language. Like I'm noticing the cars out my window, like driving by, right? There's like a rhythm to it. Likewise, like there's a rhythm to your breath, perhaps. Or like a sound, a hum in the room you're in, perhaps. All that stuff's just happening, right? Cars are going by my window. See, this lack of judgment, it's often easier to have someone facilitate it for us than for us to do it by ourselves. This is one reason that people listen to meditations or hypnosis on YouTube or whatever, because it's like you're hearing my voice, and then like, it kind of eases you into the fact that you're just here, and I'm confirming what you already know. So as I said, this space that we're in, this is very open. And as I mentioned, if you feel like it, if you don't have a specific question for me, I encourage you to go into the next hour as if you knew nothing about quote unquote manifesting. And I don't care if we talk about manifesting at all, because this is manifesting. This is like the creative process unfolding right in front of us right now. You get to this space and there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room. And the funny thing is we usually just don't acknowledge it. So we just spent a moment acknowledging it. And we can continue going like this for as long as we want. If people have questions, they can ask them starting now. They can ask them via audio and video or via chat. And we will go from there. And we can also just be quiet. That's also very good. One thing I like about these meditations is usually after I lead them, no one has anything to say, including me. See, in silence like this, we get the answers that we're looking for a lot of the time. And I know everybody on this call, or a lot of people on this call know that, but it's very interesting to experience it in a group setting like this. Because, you know, we're talking about manifestation or creating your reality, and I'm saying this is it right here. And this is so good, I might just have to put it all on YouTube, the meditation. A big thing that I've been pondering for myself the last, I don't know, year maybe, has been this concept that's popular in LOA, that, or I should say, it's paid lip service in a lot of LOA circles, but it's also spoken seriously by some teachers, most notably that I know of, Joel Goldsmith, where he talks about meditation, and Goldsmith's a good example of somebody who emphasized meditating on God as basically the entire practice. Joseph Murphy called that like the absolute method. H. Emily Cady called that like trustful passivity. Emmett Fox called that the golden key. Many different words kind of describing the same approach. But in my opinion, Goldsmith perhaps is the most overt person articulating just, well, don't try to manifest anything. Don't try to change reality. Just recognize God. And of course that sounds very similar to like, Emmett Fox, the golden key. Stop thinking about your problems and think about God instead. Stop thinking about your problems and just think about God instead. But what I've been thinking about considering over the last 6 months or a year, I'm not sure how long it's been, what Goldsmith really hits upon often is when we're meditating upon God, you always hear that line in a lot of these New Thought teachings, like God does not behold iniquity, right? Everything's perfect in God's eyes. And so I guess you could say more traditional LOA is like, well, we recognize the goodness in everything, right? And that gets rid of the bad. But what Goldsmith always emphasized, or not always, but often emphasizes, is that there is no bad, but there is no good either. There's just God. And so if that's the case, what is there to attain? This is it. And again, I think a lot of different teachings, especially from like the kind of LOA canon, point back to this. Like A Course in Miracles is always talking about like correct judgment. Like let me see things as they are, like that's salvation. I think that's very similar to what Goldsmith is saying. But too often, I think, especially in LOA circles, people are trying to create a new reality or create a new, better life. And I use that language all the time. I think it's very practical and good. But from a purely, I guess you could say, spiritual practice or meditative practice, if we're doing something meditatively, for some of you, it might resonate more to approach it the way I just talked about. Richard Dotz has that famous, or not a famous book, but the book I always talk about, Dissolve the Problem, where he says, there's two sides of the coin. On one side is the problem, the other side is the solution. But he said basically get rid of the coin. That's similar to what Goldsmith's talking about. Because we inadvertently tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves by trying to be good, trying to make our life better, trying to stop the bad. And where is all that right now? It's in your imagination only. And of course, you can say, well, your imagination creates your reality. But I mean, imaginatively, it's just there. It's fantasy. And what's not fantasy is what's right here. That's neither good nor bad. That's space. That's openness. And this is, again, why we have to be so malleable with these terms, flexible, because this could be explained in a totally different way. If you've watched some of my old videos, listen to some of my old podcast episodes, I probably talked about the same concept using almost the opposite language. And sometimes when I discuss affirmations, it sounds almost the opposite of this. I'm not talking about affirmations, and I'm not talking about some mystical approach either. I'm talking about now, because that's all we are, and that's where we can work from in terms of quote unquote working with our imagination, right? Working with where we're at. I like to say, feel good, not bad, or feel okay, but really you don't have to feel good to do this, as long as you don't feel bad either. In other words, if you're not worried about what's bad and what's good, you're here. Bam, all set. So this is all about, in my opinion, integrating this so it doesn't sound just totally esoteric, like I'm just the crazy person talking about it. Listen, I'm exactly the same as you. It sounds just as crazy to me when I say it as it probably does to you. Like, this is about integrating it so it makes some sense. It makes some sense. So yeah, if it makes some sense, I don't know, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel more peace. And in all likelihood, to bring in the more manifesting angle, if you feel more peace, more stuff that you want is going to come your way. Your external reality will probably match up more to what you want. But that is like way secondary to what we're talking about in many ways. Goldsmith, for instance, he always said, like, I got into the healing profession, not to become a healer, not to heal people, but to show them this. And, I can speak personally, like, before I ever knew about these LOA ideas, I was into thinking in psychology, like in the psychology of like, I'm thinking, or what happens when I quote unquote stop thinking. I know you can't stop thinking, but those of you familiar with my stop being serious stuff, when you move around a lot, when your body gets active, your thinking seemingly stops, or it stops being rational, logical, linear based. It's like, I'm here now. That's what interests me. That is exactly what we're talking about. So this is not LOA exclusive. LOA is one interpretation of this kind of, ecumenical, or, this is something that is in all world religions, or, different paths all come back to this point, which you could say, to sound cliche, is just now, being present now. So that is, that's what I always talk about. That's what I'm always been into. Even, and I think LOAs is a great confirmation of that. Sheena, you're saying that's probably why this exercise is so relieving to the mind. Yep. Yeah, of course. Well, this exercise, I mean, you're very, we know each other. Like, you're very familiar with my approach, but like, it's very relieving to the mind, because the mind doesn't have to do anything. It's like, you're okay right now. You don't have to do anything. And so the mind, in a way, is probably like, oh, the relief. I'm not trying to be something or thinking I have to I can just be, right? These group calls are getting more and more wild when we just do these tangential ones, because it's like, I have nothing to say. And so it's just conveying that I have nothing to say. That's all I want to convey. When we get deep, at least, again, we can talk about practical stuff, we can talk about relationship stuff, whatever, but like, this is the underlying stuff. You immediately feel better when you stop judging yourself with that conscious mind is saying right, wrong, right, wrong, right, wrong. I think Goldsmith, again, I'm paraphrasing here and I might even be mistaken, but he says something, I think it's in The Thunder of Silence, where he's like, I've realized the only way to really become present is to not judge something as being good or bad. It's all God, right? So how could it be good or bad? So if you're saying, so presence is the only way to maintain a strong self-concept, to me, the other concepts, techniques, I can't seem to stick to. To so I feel I can't either stick to any other technique except for this. Um, but Zip, I would say, I don't know if this you maintain a strong self-concept this way, because this destroys the self over and over and over again. You just get more comfortable being gone. So I don't know. But this is the only technique I can do long term. It's the only technique I do. Yeah, I mean, I do other minor things like a journal. Sometimes I use affirmations. Sometimes I visualize, but this approach is the only thing that I really enjoy. I want to do this, and maybe if this approach resonates with you, I think when you get used to it, you'll want to do it too. It might seem scary or what have you, but there's zero pressure there. We did a free call. I'm trying to think when it was. My gosh, I think it might have been like a year and a half ago, where I was talking about just sitting and meditating, where you're just sitting and not trying to do anything. You're just sitting. And you can have your eyes open. You're like, you can scratch your nose. It's not like a formal, whatever. You're just sitting. And I said, like, if you just do that a couple times a day, you'll probably learn to kind of like that, because that's like, you're just allowing yourself to be there. Yeah, exactly. I do that a lot. Exactly. Same here. So, I mean, I'm all for the different techniques and approaches, like I really am. Like, just because I make fun on some of my YouTube videos of how people talk about them, and say about how great sats are, or robotic affirmations. I'm all for all that stuff. I guess I would argue, though, that all that stuff, when it works effectively in some way, points back to this, which is this right here, right now. And so, yeah, I mean, if you like that, Zip, I mean, that's definitely something you can just do, cultivate. And, again, there's all these great LOA teachers that will help you, guide you along. Joel Goldsmith, H.M. Lee Cady, Emmett Fox, to name a few. Like, that was something they taught. All three of those teachers spoke about that a lot. And most of them do, I mean, Neville, people get so interested in the specific manifestations, but like in 5 lessons, in his short pamphlet, The Search, as well as in his, recorded lectures that became the 5 lessons book, Neville talks about, like, being on a ship and just dwelling on, like, the idea of perfection, right? And he had this vision, because Neville always had visions or whatever, but like dwelling on that idea of perfection, how, again, God is too pure to behold iniquity. That's this too. That's the same thing. And as I said, Joseph Murphy talks about it in The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. He calls it the absolute method. I would say most of these teachers are getting at that. Most of these LOA teachers, and maybe if, like, we're talking about Abraham Hicks or something, they're talking more about being, dwelling on source or whatever. I don't know. I don't know the Abraham Hicks lingo as much. Richard Dotz called it the magic feeling. I think now he calls it no mind in his new books, but it's like, you're just here. But what I want to emphasize during this call, this is just the way it's going, is when you're just here, it's not necessarily special. Some of those teachers, like, Dotz calls it the magic feeling, right? Like, people add something to it. And I'm just trying to remind y'all and myself that there's nothing to add. It's not magic. It's not good or bad. It's just here. So it doesn't have to feel ecstatic. It can, that's fine. But the important thing is that you're here and you're always here. So it's more like a recognition of that. And the more you recognize that perhaps consciously, Zip, to kind of circle back, perhaps the more grounded you are. So maybe that does, keep your self-concept strong, if we want to use that language. Again, I'm not really trying to be too literal or practical minded talking about this. So it's more like a Zen idea. Like any idea I say, I'm going to cut it down the next paragraph. I'm going to say it's not that, like in some of, I think, Hinduism, like there's the neti branch, like just like, no, like not that, like, no. That's what we're talking about here. We can get more practical. It's fine. I mean, we can talk more practically about it, but this is the vibe. This keeps you right here with your imagination, fresh. But nothing out there, just here. I have a feeling you guys are getting what I'm trying to say, because it's not, I mean, again, what I'm saying is not that, like, you've heard this before many times. It's just, I think it's helpful to hear it from like in relation to these manifesting teachings, because there's so much bypassing where people are trying to achieve a certain blissful state, right? Or the void state. Marvin and I were joking about that the other day. And I'm saying there's none of that. You don't have to achieve anything inwardly, right? That doesn't mean you can't go out and get your external manifestations or see them happen, but inwardly, nothing's going to be achieved. This is it. So you give yourself space where you sit down to meditate, pray, whatever you want to call it, saying, I'm sitting down not to get anything. And then you're all right. And of course, this is something that one could say is highly abnormal, and you have to practice it in a way to get used to it. I mean, this is so different than how most people approach a lot of stuff, including spirituality, because like I'm telling you, you're going to get nothing, right? Like that's a fresh approach. And something else Goldsmith talks about a lot is like, if you have that kind of approach, it seems to be that what you need is, to quote the Bible, like added unto you, is included, basically, right? Okay, so it's like, with this kind of perspective, this kind of approach, you're not living for tomorrow, you're living for today. You're not worrying about tomorrow. I mean, of course, our conscious mind, our egoic mind is not always, but regularly worrying about the future. But this kind of approach is saying, don't be concerned about your worries, focus on now, and what you need will be provided to you. This is like, again, the backbone of a lot of this New Thought stuff. And when you hear about like neutrality in this space, like being neutral, this is what that means too. I have a feeling, if you're on this call or if you're watching this video, there's people who get into manifesting who want things, right? But if you're into these ideas for long enough, you realize that as much as you want something and as many things as you get, that's like an endless That's Maya, that's suffering, that's never ending, right? And it's fine to want, it's fine to get things. But what's, again, underlying that is the relief you have when you have it. And that relief is accessible to us, you could say, right now, when you stop judging yourself. It's like, oh, you mean I'm okay right now? Ah, like you said, Sheena, I mean, it's like, it's relieving to the mind. Neville often talked about relief, right? It is done. I can exhale. It's done. And it's very tempting because there's all these ideas out there. There's all this stuff on social media, all these theories. It's very tempting to be like, I have to find out about these techniques or do a certain thing. And what this kind of approach we're talking about is like, no, you don't. You're okay right now. You recognize you're okay right now. And you live your life. You do what needs to be done. And if you want to focus on getting a certain something, you do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But we don't have to be in any certain state or assume the wish fulfilled, because the wish fulfilled is right now. This is a pretty esoteric one. I apologize if it's overly esoteric. The greatest relief I've felt in my life has always been when I've realized that there's nothing I have to change or do. So you do or don't agree with the idea of the wish fulfilled? Exclamation point, round punctuation. I like that. I like the exclamation point at the end instead of the question mark. So where I'm coming from with this, what we're talking about right now, it's that there is no idea. If that makes any sense. Conceptually, I of course believe in that. If you believe you're going to get something or feel it's already fulfilled, chances are you're going to get it and do what's necessary to get it, either consciously or unconsciously. But what I'm saying is like, this is fulfillment right now. The wish fulfilled is right now. We don't recognize it. We don't recognize the wish fulfilled is right now. Again, if God was here right now and revealing himself, herself to us, what would we be lacking? And of course, the thing is, well, God is here right now, revealing herself, himself to us, and we're not lacking anything. We think we lack something and we don't. That's the realization. The wish fulfilled is just realizing that you're already fine, that everything's fine, that everything's already grace. And again, this is what links it with more of the Eastern and more mystical Western teachings, is that. So it really is the wish fulfilled exclamation point, not question mark. Again, we can get more intellectual. I mean, obviously I have hundreds of videos and written stuff where it's much more intellectual than this, but we're talking about more primal energy, right? Like just boom, 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 boom. That's here right now. The wish fulfilled's right now. You're okay right now. You are the universe, Buddha nature, God is God right now. Again, it's often easier when you hear someone say this to you, right? Than like when you're like alone and you wake up, it's 5:30 in the morning, and you are awoken from a sound outside or something like that, and it's like, I'm God, everything's okay. I don't. Oftentimes there's disorientation. Our lives are lived in disorientation, worrying, suffering. And the good news of the gospel is that you're okay right now. Always have been. Yeah, great point, Sheena. I think the wish fulfilled means the state of complete contentment. Exactly. I would say the same thing. And I guess what I've noticed with a lot of people, including myself, is like, we think, well, I'll be more content if I feel better. Like if something, like, I shouldn't feel this quote unquote bad to be content. But what I'm saying is, like, how about if you just don't worry about feeling bad or feeling good, and you're just content as you are? You got to read between the lines and everything we're talking about tonight, because this is very just like one thing contradicts the next thing, because it's like we're trying to get underneath that. We're trying to get underneath the normal thinking mind, rationalizing it to the essence. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions? It's totally fine, obviously, if no one does. The only scary part is people fearing they won't get what they want. Oh, if I'm content, things will stay the same. I think that's the lie that we all wrestle with. Absolutely. Certainly one of the lies we wrestle with. It's the contradiction, like the paradox is, if we're content, things will change more to our liking in all likelihood. You know what I mean? They will not stay the same. To paraphrase that great Carl Rogers quote, like, the paradox is it's only when I accept myself fully that things can change. So we think that if we're content, things are going to stay the same. We're not going to be happy. But that's ridiculous, because when you're content, first of all, you're not unhappy, you're happy, and things inevitably change, and things always change. But that's the kind of stuff that, goes on in our mind and our thinking, and you could say self-sabotages us. And it's scary. You're absolutely right. It's scary. Julia says, I'm wondering if attachment to quote unquote good can be a survival technique. When you have experienced trauma, you need to imagine that good still exists out there because you don't want to exist anymore. You've been stripped of a relationship with the now. The now is too painful without the idea of better, of goodness being achievable. So what I would say to that is that makes complete sense. What we're talking about tonight is not about making complete sense. Conceptually, of course, you want to imagine there's something good because you're in a loop, perhaps, I guess psychodynamically, of like something bad. Like you keep on imagining, fearing the trauma over and over and over again. That's the default, right? And so it's like, well, I need to complement that, or I need to counteract that with a good. to kind of neutralize, to just get myself to an even space. What I'm kind of getting at tonight, and I say kind of because, again, I don't want any of this interpreted too literally. You can't be stripped of a relationship with the now. It's impossible. You're always here now. But that survival mechanism, a survival technique, that's a good way of labeling it, is to make it, I think, is to say, like, listen, you're okay. Like, all this, my body's reacting to this trauma, right? This is to remind you that you're okay, that there's the other side to this. But that is a technique or whatever. And what we're talking about now is not a technique. So, you got to deal with whatever you can when someone's in that situation, to go through that trauma, to experience it and to integrate it so it doesn't overwhelm them, and make it, to make it better as opposed to worse. Again, and this is practically how you would do that. When when I'm speaking to a client in a situation like that, that's what we try to do. I'm not using all this esoteric mumbo jumbo. The esoteric mumbo jumbo has its place. Don't get me wrong. In my opinion, it's the quote unquote truth. But it's like, if I was working with someone or working with myself in a situation like that, I'm going to be using different words than I'm using now. Let's put it that way. And, the other thing to mention is, if you're experiencing the trauma, somatically getting into the body, getting more present with the now in that way, and feeling it gently, not going too far where you feel overwhelmed, but feeling into it gently. And again, having a good therapist definitely is a good bet when you do something like that, usually. But feeling into it in a way where you feel safe, even though you're kind of on the razor's edge, that will help neutralize you too. But yeah, it is like a survival technique or mechanism, in my opinion, to think of the good when you've gone through all this bad, to get you to keep you going, to keep you alive, right? And there are, many examples of people, again, who have like mental breakdowns, who are in this, have had all this trauma, where like that breakdown, it's so bad, it's so overwhelming that's what leads to some, totally unexpected experience of quote unquote enlightenment or clarity from that trauma. However, obviously, I'm not encouraging, like, I'm not saying like that's the way to go. I'm just saying, like, if we're getting very down to like the root of it or the core, it's like, this is the kind of stuff that's going on. So nothing is wrong. But to like say someone who has been like abused or traumatized, oh, just be in the now. I mean, again, that's just insane. That's unfortunately, we hear sometimes stuff like that in this community. That's crazy. Like, that's obviously, there's so much more to it. There's so many levels and nuances to it. So yes, that's a great question and a great point. The paradox, Gina said, yeah, exactly. Gina, I understand presence. Have you seen or had a complete reality shift? Gina, I'm not sure I understand that question. I think I understand, about if you want to expand upon it a little bit more about presence and seeing or had a complete reality shift. My initial answer to you, but I might be misinterpreting it, is there's nothing to really like presence isn't understood, right? It's just like here now, I would say. And there's no reality shift. This is not an external thing we're talking about. It's just internal. At least in my experiences. Do you have any thoughts on mental illness such as schizophrenia? Random, I know. No, it's not random at all, Sheena. I don't, Sheena. I don't know enough. I'm not a licensed therapist, so I don't want to be talking about schizophrenia and give you something that's just so off. I felt somewhat okay answering that trauma question before, just because I have some experience working with people like that. And, I know a lot of therapists who obviously work with people who have experienced bad trauma, but schizophrenia, I don't feel qualified to talk about that. So if you want to expand the question, I can, answer it a little bit more if there is anything I have to say about it. I have read theories, from this community about things like mental illnesses like schizophrenia, but I'm not going to touch on that because I disagree with most of what I've read in like the law of assumption space. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, hope that it was helpful. Yeah, Janet, feel free to expand upon that question about presence. I'm not sure I got it or not. Obviously, again, it's very hard to label what we're talking about here anyway. Yeah. Or if there's any other questions too, people can ask them. So yeah, if people, again, if there's final thoughts, you can write them in or, turn on your audio or video, but I'll just end with that. In the manifestation community, especially online, people put such an emphasis on changing their lives externally. And obviously that is perfectly appropriate to have that focus on, I want to change my external world and I want to kind of do it or help myself do it from changing how I feel about things on the inside, right? That has its time and place. What we're talking about here is the big boy, big girl stuff of like, well, even if you get that stuff, you're still here. You still have to deal with you. You got to deal with your inner stuff, with how you are treating life moment to moment. And is there a way that, we can allow ourselves to be more open to the moment and not judge ourselves and our thinking as harshly, and not judge things as being good or bad as quickly as we often do? And in my experiences, being more meditative, I guess you could say, in the way we've talked about in this call, has really helped me. I know it's helped many others. And it's the kind of approach that you see spoken about so eloquently in a lot of these, older New Thought LOA teachings, like by people like Joel Goldsmith, H. Emily Cady, and many others. So yeah, this was a wild call. But I hope that people got something good out of it. Is this what you do in your one-on-one sessions, dropping into presence, non-judgmental contentment, and some discussion? Yes and no. I mean, my private one-on-one calls are entirely based upon what the client needs. But we, if you've never done a consultation with me, a free consultation with me, I can probably get you a better sense of what you're looking for and how I can help you or not help you. But we do a lot of somatic work, a lot of being present in the moment. And then it just depends what the client needs. If the client is looking for specific outer changes in their life, we usually have things we can discuss in regards to techniques and approaches, but it always comes back to grounding ourselves in the present. But yeah, each client and each session, frankly, is different. So there's not really a one-size-fits-all answer to that. All right, everybody. If you have any questions, you know where to find me, radicalcounselor.com. This has been a fun one tonight. I hope you got something out of it. And yeah, if you like the meditation, feel free to listen to it again. Sometimes these group meditations are hit home for some people a lot, which is one reason we do them. Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying the meditations are good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. And very nice to see some familiar names and faces. All right, guys, until next time, enjoy. All right. Thanks. Bye.